Hello, everybody. Before we get into episode 7 of the podcast, I wanted to take a minute and talk about the current state of affairs in our country and our local communities, especially as in light of and as a result of the senseless murder of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. Not to mention the other names that we could spend minutes talking about that have experienced police brutality and injustice. And as a white man, I've always struggled with how much I should speak up because I didn't want to overshadow the voices of my black brothers and sisters. It wasn't because I didn't want to say something. It wasn't because I didn't think it would help. It was because I didn't know if it was my place. And what I'm learning is that to be silent and to use that reasoning is adding to the problem. Silence is in and of itself an action, and I don't want to be on that side of action. I want to be on the side of speaking up, speaking out, calling it what it is, and supporting my black brothers and sisters as we come together. And the more that white people come together on this in support of our black brothers and sisters and people of color, the faster and more effective racism will be eradicated from the hearts and minds of those people that deal with it. Refuge, the other organization that I work with and operate, serves a number of young people, many of which are black young men and women. And we're going to be doing a lot in the community to try to serve better this issue. We're going to be reaching out to local police departments and city officials and asking them what they're doing to educate their people on race relations and the plight of young black Americans. We're going to be asking them what we can do to serve our young black American community members in our own area. And we're going to be doing that through all the different organizations that I work with. Silence is no longer an option because people are dying, and they've been dying for a long time. And as a white man, I want to encourage any other white person who thinks that their voice doesn't matter in this, speak up, because your silence is louder than it should be, and it's louder on the wrong side. Don't be silent about this anymore. Bring it up when you see it, call it what it is, and through that action, maybe we will start to see a unity come together that can put an end to all of this senseless, completely evil, unnecessary violence. I can't empathize with the struggle of my black brothers and sisters because I don't have some of the experiences that they have. But I see the oppression, I see the struggle, I see the injustice, and I can be enraged about that, and I am enraged about that. And so we're going to no longer be silent. We're going to talk about it on this podcast. We didn't get to this week because of time, but we are going to talk about it in the future. We're going to bring other people in that could teach us about it, that can educate us, that can speak to it. There's links at the bottom of the description of this video. We're asking you to reach out to us. Tell us your story. Tell us how we can help. Tell us what we should do. If you're looking for ways to help, we can maybe talk about ways we can do that together. But let's not be quiet anymore. Let's not be silent. So we are going to get into the podcast. We got a good conversation this week. We're excited about it. But we're not going to let this sit by the wayside. We're not going to let this just sit. We're going to talk about it. We're going to address it. We're going to call it what it is. It's evil. And we're going to stand in unity with our black brothers and sisters until this is over, until there's an end to racism. So we'll get to the podcast now, but we're not done having this conversation. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to episode 7 of the Safehouse Podcast. We're excited you joined us again for this week. With me in the studio, my dad, Pastor Bob Denon. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great.
Good. We did not plan to wear the same shirt today, but we just got some new shirts in, and apparently we're both very excited about it.
I was thinking about wearing my hat too, but
It's probably good.
I had a meeting earlier, so I was like, it's not a hat day.
Yeah, the hat looks good. I'm wearing the hat partially because I don't have any more hair product in my house. Just a little peek behind the curtain. I got to go to the store.
You always share those personal little things with us each week.
Yeah, people like to know what's going on.
Yeah,
or they don't,
like
and I just like to share.
Like your dogs.
My dogs have double the waist because I have 2 dogs now.
And
My
Amy,
yard is
did you see the reply that Amy gave us on the dog thing?
Amy left a comment that she learned a lot of really important things from you, and that she learned from me that she shouldn't get a dog because there's a lot more poop.
Shouldn't get a second dog.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also with us, Brandon. Good morning. How you doing, man?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm good.
What's up?
I'm good.
Not too much.
One thing, Brandon and I were talking about this, and one thing that we want to take a minute and say is that due to the craziness of like how things are so thrown off, I did not realize that last week the podcast comes out on Mondays. I didn't realize that this past week was even Memorial Day. So it came out on Tuesday, but if I would have even remembered, we would have taken a minute to say thank you to all the people who have served in any capacity in our military services. And if you've lost somebody in a military, situation, just know that we are grateful for this, for your service as a family member, and that just we have family members that are listening to this that are career military people.
Yep.
And it's scary, but it's important, and what you do matters. And we just want to take a minute to remember those that we've lost and say thank you to those that are still with us. And,
absolutely.
And we would have done it last week, but again, it's just so crazy. The holiday came around, and I thought, oh, we're not going to work today because it's Memorial Day, and everything that people do on Memorial Day. And I thought we should have said something. So we apologize. It's a week late, but again, thank you for what you do, and we're with you. Mm-hmm. So this week, last week we made an announcement that we are getting some new equipment and that we're going to be switching to a different studio. The equipment took a little longer to get here than we thought, and so we're here for one more week. But next week, you'll see a different set behind us. You'll see a different room. We're going to be in a different space. We're super excited about it.
I won't be there.
And yeah, you won't be here because June starts some traveling for you.
Yep.
And you get to go fishing for a while.
I do.
And that's exciting.
I'm going to go to Grenada, Mississippi next week.
We got a lot of exciting things that we're going to be doing. We've had some people, we mentioned this after the first week, we had some people who asked us about like these mugs, and like they noticed the merch, like the logo wear that we had, or whatever you want to call it. We are working on developing a way that you could purchase that stuff if you're interested in it. So keep in tune to that. You're going to see this on YouTube, or you're going to listen to it on iTunes or Spotify. It's on SoundCloud as well. Safehousersd.com is the website. If we get to a place where we can start like taking orders and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be available on safehousersd.com.
We're getting a lot of attention on the new shirts.
Yeah, people like them.
Kind of changed them up a little bit.
These hats are like, a little nicer, I think, than the ones we had before.
Maybe we could even get some merch with like the Safehouse podcast logo on it or something like that.
Wow,
yeah.
he's reaching on that one.
Yeah, we got some exciting things.
Yeah, let's see. We don't even have the
we
cups,
haven't even like it's available on YouTube. You can see it on YouTube.
That's the only place
and
we
then
have it now.
on SoundCloud and the iTunes and all that. But yeah, that's the only place that's out there right now. We should get some stuff with the logo on there.
I'd rock it.
So for sure.
Yeah, he'd probably wear that more than the regular Safehouse stuff. Knowing him.
But yes, we're going to be in a new studio next week. We got new cameras, we got new lights, we got new equipment. We didn't have time. It came in now, but we didn't have time to get it all calibrated and set up and get super familiar with it and comfortable enough to use it this week. So next week, it's going to be there. But before we get into this week, we kind of committed that the first like 5, 6, 7 weeks were going to be a lot of storytelling. And we've had conversations, Dad and I, and then I've followed up with Brandon. He, if I haven't said it before, Brandon handles all the production. He's the producer of the podcast. And so we talk with him about how it's going to go, what it's going to look like, the content, kind of the direction we want it to go. What we decided to do first off is tell a lot of stories. And we wanted people to get to know you. We wanted them to get to know me. We wanted them to get to know Safehouse on a more intimate level. We saw this as an outlet to tell your side of stories that people hadn't heard before. Mm-hmm. And so, but we're going to start leaning away from, today is one of those last, like we called them those benchmarks, those disruptions in the development of the company. And so after this week, we're going to be shifting. We're going to be shifting to telling less like intimate, detailed, extended stories, and more into like life and leadership and parenting and business and vision and some of those other things that we think are more, I want to use the word educational, but just more, inspiring or motivating or whatever, rather than just kind of like our story. There's still going to be stories because they're a great narrative. They're a great example, but they're still, the purpose of the hour is not going to be just to tell our story. It's going to be to to
Right.
get more into some more life lesson type stuff. So thanks for sticking with us through 7 weeks. This is the 7th week. Another thing that I wanted to address before we got into this week's story is, if you notice here, our set here, we've got, all the nice mics and table and stuff set up, but everything that's on this shelf, couldn't think of the word, has something that represents, except for the greenery. That's just pretty, and I liked it. That's why we bought that. But the teddy bear. You've heard the teddy bear story. If you haven't, you can watch it on the website. But these marbles right here are important to us because there's a representation. There's a book written by, oh my gosh, the author is escaping me right now. Reggie Joyner is his name. And he wrote a book called Losing Your Marbles. And in it, he talks about how we only have a limited number of time with our children, right? And if you were to, and I do this at home, if you were to take from the date of your child's birth to their 18th birthday, or roughly around the time they graduate high school, you have a actual countable number of Saturdays, right? You have this many weeks between birth and when they are going to graduate.
Right.
And so what I did is, for each of my 3 children, and I actually have to update Emerson, my youngest, but for each of my children, I have a jar, and in it is the number of marbles. The number of marbles represents how many Saturdays I have before they graduate high school. And every week I take a marble out and I put it away. But before I put it away, I kind of roll it around in my fingers and I think, what did I do with my son this week that made this marble, this week, this time count, right? And my wife's not crazy about it. It makes her miserable. She's like, I don't want to see the time go away.
Right.
And my argument to that, and it's not an argument, but my response to that is, the time's going to go away,
right,
whether we count it or not. Let's count it so that way we're almost forced to take advantage of it, to get more out of it, because we only have so many of these weeks, these Saturdays left before they graduate high school and hopefully go off and be independent,
right,
people. We don't, I'd be happy if he sticks around town, but I don't want him to be living in my house until he's 30. You know what I'm saying? Like, that would mean that I'd probably let him down in some capacity. Mm-hmm. And so we count the marbles, we put it away, and we do it. And so the marbles here, there's 180 marbles in this jar. And 180 marbles for Safehouse is the average length of stay, as far as days, that a resident will stay with us. The average length, give or take, is
right,
about 6 months.
Right.
And so we float around 180 days with each kid. Now, the vast majority of our kids stay longer than that, but the ones that don't stay that long stay so short that the average
right,
is about 6 months.
Right.
And so if you ever were like looking at the set and you just saw, that jar of marbles, that's what it represents, because we want to take advantage of every day, every minute, every second, every moment of time that we have with these young people, because all it takes is a moment. And I don't mean to sound too cliche, but all it takes is a moment for somebody's life to change dramatically. It takes one look,
for good or bad.
Or bad. It could be,
right,
it could be either way, but one moment matters and we don't want to miss it. And so that's just a little, like I said, peek behind the curtain. We're going to be changing sets up. We're going to be, getting into a whole different space. And so I just wanted to take a minute and explain that. And so, but with that, we got one more story that we want to share with you that we're going to get into. And to recap, and again, you can go back and listen to the first 6 weeks if you want and get the full story. But we started in an old hospital in Warren. We moved to an old hospital in Youngstown. And through all of those different situations, we ran into real estate issues, landlord issues, leadership issues, all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up in a quick turnaround. We had a 2-year plan to get from the hospital in Youngstown to come to here on our new campus in the east side of Youngstown. And it had to be done in like 100 days.
Right.
And it worked and it didn't. And we did it. And then in just about 7-8 months ago, maybe 9 months ago now, we finished the newest addition to the property, which was a gymnasium.
Correct.
That houses offices and classrooms and a kitchen and all that other stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rewind to that middle section of second campus.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I changed leadership from the first old hospital in Warren to the new hospital in Youngstown.
Right.
We had changed the leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm talking about administration down. We have a tendency, I call it my top core.
Yeah.
It's either somewhere between 8 and 10 people that I put all of my energy into, and I put all my attention into them as far as leadership development and we've basically broke down the company into about 8 or 9, 10 different areas of expertise, and then I plug people in that's got the giftedness for the different areas of it. Main reason is because I'm not gifted in everything.
Right.
And so that allows me to do what I need to do as far as just keeping everybody kind of going in the right direction of what we want to do with the vision. And so we've worked diligently for the last 12, 13 years to develop the team really that we've had probably now 4 or 5, maybe 6 years we've had this team put together. Yeah. And administration-wise, we've had very, very little turnover because we've worked extremely hard to put this team together. But prior to that, I had put a businessman in place of another administrator that we had to let go unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And first couple of years, it went fairly smooth. We had, not really disruption, just kind of selling down from the other. It seemed like the tension of what the other group of people tried to do to us was the focus to keep us moving forward. And we, of course, had to leave the Warren building and go into the building that we moved out of, a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I got real comfortable with this individual, and I began to allow him to kind of undermine me as if I wasn't as educated as him, or I didn't have as much experience as him. And he wanted to surround the company with people that he knew that were strong businessmen.
Right.
And so at first it was like, yeah, let's do this. And he's introduced me to all these people. And before I knew it, my core was our board of directors, which was about 8 people strong, and they all had business background.
Right. Now, did he originally ask or say that he wanted these men on the board? Or did he just say that let's get some of these guys involved as almost like an advisory council or anything like that? Or did he come out right away and say...
No, at first it was like, well, this person does this with insurance, so let's go with this person. And this person is an attorney, so let's get him involved. And before I knew it, they were all his friends, except for a couple people. And the board was starting to shift a little bit. It was more of his group of people and less of mine that was in there.
Yeah.
And the position of power began to shift. And then they began to look at the financials and begin to say things like, we could make more money if we do this. If we cut here, which was basically money going to the kids, or it was money going to the staff.
Yeah.
If we cut here, we can have this much more money. We can do this much more. And one of the themes that I've always had since we started this was I wanted our people to basically, I want to provide a good living for our employees, and so we pay above the average.
Yeah. For the industry.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what he wanted to do was basically minimum wage. And my problem with that is you get what you pay for.
Right. Not only that, but, and I don't mean to interrupt, but like if you're unaware of if you're listening and you're unaware of what residential services is, these kids can be incredibly violent.
Right.
And some of them, all of them, have experienced severe trauma.
Yes.
And that usually is expressed in some sort of, bad behavior. And so the requirement and the expectation on our staff is quite literally life and death.
Right.
Like they're keeping these kids alive because some of them really want to hurt themselves or hurt other people. So there's extensive training. I mean, the minimum amount of training that they have to have is 40 hours, 20 hours in policy and
which well.
Yeah, policy and what we call verbal de-escalation. There's restraint training in case they have to get involved in a physical intervention.
Right.
And then there's all of the basic like day-to-day stuff, just the clocking it, just the basic like daily training about where the meds are and how to do that. And then there's separate extensive training on med, distribution and stuff.
Right.
And so it's not a minimum wage job, And so if you're hearing this and you're a business person and you're thinking about it, and you're like, yeah, why not? If the people are going to agree to it, then, why not? But there's no amount of money you can pay somebody that would justify putting up with what they have to put up with, because it's like the hardest, most difficult stuff of people and young people that are hurting. So they wanted to do minimum wage.
Right. They started to look at the things financially. And of course, this was in 2008, 2009, when we really, really had some hard times financially within the country. The housing bubble had just burst. There was that major recession that we was heading into. You couldn't borrow any money from anything. Cash flows was just a noose around our neck. And so there was some reasons why they wanted to kind of button down the hatches. And overall, I wasn't against it, but by allowing him to surround us with his type of people, we began to lose sight of what the ministry was,
right,
and what we really were doing ministry-wise. And after looking back on it, there was a period of time that I didn't really realize what he had done because I had confidence in him.
right.
But slowly but surely, I gave up this word that I'll say loosely. Slowly but surely, he took over power.
Okay.
He had more authority and more power than he probably needed.
Right.
And he had surrounded himself with people that took power away from me.
Yeah.
And I remember him and I beginning to kind of bump heads a little bit, and he would go do some certain things. He contacted a couple of the donors without me knowing about it, and really stirred up a hornet's nest. And I remember the first day I found out that he had done it, I went in, and Miss Lisa, which is our office manager, she basically cleared the offices out because on that day everybody could hear me. I was screaming at the top of my lungs because he really did some long-term damage to us by going to these people that really were the people I needed to talk to. They didn't need to talk to him.
Yeah.
And so looking at it and starting to realize that I was starting to experience the same thing that we did with the last administrator.
Right.
The only difference was they were doing it behind the scenes, and we had to cut them off quick, which the collateral damage was extensive financially on us. And I began to see that this was beginning to happen again, that money was driving the decision-making 100% and not ministry.
Right.
And so I realized that if I cut it off the way, and at that point, the power structure within the organization had shifted so much that there was these group of men that were talking behind the scenes to vote me out, and to get me out of the company. And I remember going to a third party's office and meeting. I thought we were going to be discussing debt reduction, and they handed me a paper, and on that paper was if I would sign it, I would be resigning as the CEO, founder of the company. They were going to pay me X amount of dollars for 3 years to walk away. Now, keep in mind, at that time, we had quite a bit of debt that was on us, and I was responsible for all the debt. These people were not responsible for the debt. And I remember that there was 2 or 3 people that were there that didn't know what was going to be happening, and it shocked them. And I remember just sliding the paper back over and saying, that's not what we're here to discuss. And I remember for about 2 hours the pressure they were putting on me. We can take care of your family. We will do this. But the end result was they wanted me out.
Yeah.
And not because I'd done anything wrong. It's because I was in the way.
Right.
And
They were not ministry driven.
Not at all.
The ministry side of it was affecting the potential that they saw from the business side.
On the financial end of things. And I think all they saw was dollar signs at that time. And I remember very strongly putting my foot down that day. In fact, I remember chewing a couple of them out pretty hard. And I basically got up, and before I left, there was a scripture that had come to me that morning. And I for the life of me, I can't remember the scripture right now. And I had wrote it down, and there was 2 or 3 people that were there that were strong ministry-minded people that were like outside parties that they had influenced, that this group of men had influenced.
Right.
And they were trying to talk me into it. And I just grabbed my Bible, opened it up to the scripture, and I said, this is what God gave me today. And I read it, and I remember the one guy looking at me, and he said, well, then we can't go against that. He said, because that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And basically, if I remember right, I think the scripture talked about division and people coming against what God wanted and to be careful of it. And what that ended up doing was that started a internal investigation on me from these group of people that then decided, well, if we can't buy him out, then we're going to remove him.
Right.
Again, another aggressive try to get me removed. I remember that they went and called our accountant and told our accountant that I was doing something wrong with the books. Sounds like a familiar story?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to jump on you, but I can't believe the cyclical pattern of this. Everything kind of goes around and around and around, and it always comes back to money. I don't know. Power. I don't know. But it always comes back to this same idea.
Right.
That there's something in the way or there's someone in the way, and we have to get them out of the way in order to do this.
It wasn't
It's like people are a commodity, and people are disposable. And that's the exact opposite of what we want to create a culture that exemplifies.
Right.
Is that people are not a commodity. People are the purpose. They're not, they're not a means to an end. The people are the reason. Even if there's staff that are working with the kids, our responsibility is to serve the staff, and then they serve the kids better. We can't serve the kids at the expense of the staff. I just don't. It's a bummer to me that this trend seems to be.
So let's talk the leadership lesson now that we went into that position as far as the same scenario. I began to be investigated.
We'll come back to the end of the story, or to the next part of the story. But yeah, go ahead.
But the thing that I want you to understand is that what I've learned in my experience is that the devil doesn't have a new fight. He just fights you on the same. He just tries to bring different areas of the fight to fight you. Now, for mine, it of course has always been the fight of I'm doing something wrong financially, or I don't know what I'm doing financially. And I've never done anything on purpose wrong financially. Wasn't educated at the time, that made some mistakes, but never did anything. And I remember one attorney I talked to one time, he says, Bob, they don't throw you in jail for mistakes. They throw you in jail when you do it on purpose. And not saying that I hadn't made mistakes in the past on finances, because we have. But it was a learning lesson to do at that time. And that's why I had surrounded myself with businessmen, is because I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes that we had made unknowingly on cash flow and different things like that. But what it ended up doing was the enemy began to use this group of people for the same fight. So if they couldn't remove me from the vision, and I look at it this way, the Bible says we don't fight against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and wickedness in high places. And so I don't fight against people. My fight with the vision is always against the enemy and what the enemy wants to do. And what I found out is he doesn't have a new fight. It's the same old fight. Now there's a lesson to be learned on that, because if you will understand the fight, and you begin to surround yourself with the things that can cancel that fight out or protect you from that fight, then it gives him less to fight in the long run coming down the road. Yeah. That's what we've done now, is we've identified where he has been fighting us, which was always on this appearance of doing wrong financially, where we weren't. So what we ended up doing after we made this shift and got the team that we got in there now, there's checks and balances upon checks and balances. Right. Instead of being audited every year, we get accountants to move in every 3 months. Yeah. And they go over every stitch of the books to make sure that it's copacetic the way I want it to be. Right. And what I'm trying to do by doing that is I'm trying to take the fight away from the devil. I'm trying to take the fight away from the enemy. That he can't come back and fight me in that way. Now he'll try to find a new way to maneuver around. Yeah. Okay. But as far as the constant in everything that was going on, here's this group of people. Now what they did was they called our accounting firm, which was just brand new to the company, and they said, Bob's doing things wrong. And so I remember him calling me and saying, hey, I've been called in by some board members. I'm going to have to look at your books. And at this time, we were just doing yearly audits is what we were doing. So he comes in and they sit down, and I remember the one individual, and the administrator was still there, but one of the board members came in and he said, I'm not here to fight you. We just want to make sure this is done right, and we know that you don't know what you're talking about, what you're doing. And I'm like, look at the books. Just look at the books. So I remember sitting in a small room, and we started to bring the books out, and they started to look at it. And all of a sudden, he had a piece of paper, and he's writing stuff down, and he goes, aha. And I went, aha, what? And he goes, well, he said, in my opinion, he said, I think what's going on here, and he was looking at the accountant. He said, you're buying stuff and then you're selling it and you're keeping the money. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, this last 6 months, he said, you've bought X amount of flags.
Flags. Like American flags.
Yeah, and I said, no, I haven't. And at this time, we have a credit card that had my name on it. We've got several credit cards that's got my name on it. We use it for expenses and stuff like that. Office.
So he saw in a line item.
So he saw in a line item
something.
on a monthly basis. There's hundreds of dollars that's going out for flags, and so
he thought you were buying them with company money.
Correct.
Selling them yourself
and keeping
personally,
it back.
and then keeping the money in your own personal.
He thought that he had me on the flags, and I'm like. I said, there's probably 5 or 6 people that buy stuff off this card. It's not just mine. I'll give it out. They need to go get gas. Here, take this card. Go get gas. Whatever. Bring the receipt back. And we had the receipt that said flags. I think it was $56 or $58 per thing. Sometimes it was twice a month. Sometimes it was 3 times a month. Sometimes it was once a month. But it had added up to almost $1,000 is what it had added up to. And
over the course of several months.
Right. And he was like, we got you. And I remember him sitting there just beaming, we got you. And so the accountant looked at me and he goes, do you know what this is? And I said, I don't know what this is. He says, but it's coming off your card. And I said, okay. So I went and grabbed the receipts and I went over to my wife's office, which is at that time, which is right now, she's still a secretary within the organization.
And a ninja at keeping financial documentation.
Unbelievable. Okay.
I mean, I'll go get dinner for us. Like, I'll take the kids to her and my dad's house, and then I'll run and I'll grab like fast food or something, and they'll be like, here, use my card. It's like $12 for like 4 meals or whatever. And my mom's like, do you have the receipt? And I'm like, no, yeah, hang on. And I got to go dig through like the thing. So she keeps everything. So if she does that at home, I know she does it with the business.
Right. And as far as a person in her, she does all of our filing for all of the paperwork within the organization, and she's phenomenal in what she does. And I remember going to her office and I'm showing her his receipts, and I said, Angie, what is this? I said, this is making me look bad. And she goes, you're so stupid. And I went, what do you mean? She goes, she said, they're so stupid. And she gets up and she walks this way. I remember. She walks over to the room, and she hadn't told me yet what was going on. And she kind of sets it down on the table and she says, they're stamps.
The American flag.
Right.
Postage stamps.
Stamps. She said, we're buying stamps with the card. He's not reselling flags. And I remember the accountant just kind of sinking in his sleep, which he's still our accountant today. We're really good friends.
He's great.
I remember him sinking in his seat, and I remember the board member looking at him and saying, there's got to be more there. And I remember the accountant at that time, he said, I'm done.
I'm hiding my face behind the microphone screen in embarrassment.
Right.
For them.
And he said, I'm done. He said, I'm done. He said, this is a witch hunt. I'm done.
Now, he was saying that as in, like, I'm done working with you guys trying to catch him,
try to
Bob,
find me. They had
convinced
convinced him that I was doing something
So he
wrong.
was coming in as a third party,
Correct.
almost like, well, let's see what happens. And then when that happened, he said, I'm done with the witch hunt.
Right.
Safehouse is going to, now was he the one who did the auditing yearly at that point?
Yes.
So his firm was doing that?
Yes.
So he'd already been like,
yeah, he'd
around
already been
and he
involved.
knew you.
Right,
and
right,
okay.
Right.
So,
and one of the things that he told me several times was, in between that meeting and then another meeting, I was called to our attorney's office, and I didn't know what was going to be called there for. And here's this board member again. This is a few weeks after the witch hunt when it comes to the finances. And he's talking to the attorney about how they're going to remove me. And she felt that she needed to call me. And at this time, he was doing all kinds of spreading rumors, and he got a hold of some of our donors, and they did a lot of damage. He and a couple other people did a lot of damage. Prior in this 2-week period or time, there was 2 or 3 board members that basically resigned, because I remember them just kind of throwing their hands up and saying, something about this is wrong. I want out of this, because they were having weekly board meetings, which was driving me insane. It was like, are you kidding me? And every time we come in, it was about attack Bob, or Bob's trying to do this, or Bob's trying to do that, or we need to give the administrator more authority, or we need to set the administrator in place. And so the mistake that I had made was I allowed this group of people to get into power. And the only way to really do it was I should have just ripped like I did before, just kick them all out, and lick my wounds and go with that. But I've been talking with our attorney on a regular basis, and I learned, one of the lessons I learned off of the first disruption was, if I handle this wrong, it'll probably bury us financially.
Yeah.
And so I ended up putting a 6-month plan together.
Okay.
And that plan was to get out on the road, meet all of our county contacts, and let them get to know me, who I was. And so through that period of time, the board member called a meeting with the accountant and with our attorney, and I came in, and he basically was, throwing everything at them to get them on board so I would be removed. And at that point, the board had enough power that they could vote me out.
Right.
The only thing that was saving me was I carried a lot of the debt of the company on my own personal being.
Does the board still have that power now?
No. In fact, after we made this move, we put in the bylaws that I couldn't be removed unless criminally I was put in jail.
Okay.
I could not be removed as the founder.
Okay.
And so the board doesn't have that authority anymore. And we made it a sense. I mean, how many times do you hear of the board? We talked about this a few weeks ago, where the board removes the founder.
It happened to Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about his leadership and that it like his vision for things all the time.
Right.
And it was his vision for his company.
And it was money that was driving the fact.
That drove the board to do away with it. Like he wanted to, anyway, it was money. He wanted to scrap an old system and put more money into a new one.
Right.
That old system was the one that was currently making money, and he believed it was because they weren't putting enough into the new one.
Right.
So the board was like, "Okay, you're gone." And they voted him out. His own company.
Yeah. I remember the day in the attorney's office.
This is not the first time you have almost tried to have been like manipulatively, forcefully removed from your own company. We told that story a few weeks ago. It's happened at least twice.
In every disruption, it's been that way. That's why I mean the fight
that happened at the church
battle
back in the day. Brandon, you grabbed your mic. Wanted to hear what you had to say.
He's no stranger to mutiny. That's for sure.
For sure, right?
Yeah.
But what I was going to add something when you talked about Steve Jobs, and we all also talked about the founder with McDonald's. It happens more than we realize when someone realizes that, whether they're a jack of all trades or not, they need people who are specialized in certain things, and a lot of those talented people come with entitlement, and that entitlement, takes over a lot of the times.
How true is that? How true is that, like, in life though too? And we're gonna go off on a tangent, so don't forget like the thing that you're talking about. But how true of that is that of all things? Like this is a little bit apples to oranges or whatever, but you see that with parents versus like teachers or religious leaders or anything where. Like a teacher may want to do something a certain way, and a parent who's not educated in how to educate children says, no, you're going to do it this way in your school. And they put all this expectation on the teacher when they're not stepping up in the home. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it just seems to happen all the time. You got religious leaders who are, they have a certain standard that they are expected to live by and teach based on their job and their expectations and their moral authority. And then you have parents who will push back on it, but won't like do anything on their own, And I face that at Refuge. We have parents who expect their kids to behave, but there's no discipline in the home. And then when they misbehave at Refuge and I discipline them, the parents will say, well, why are you, they don't deserve that. Right. And it's like, and so there's this constant thread of, and I think entitlement is probably the big definition there, the big key word, because there's this idea that, you invited these men in at the council who at that time was a trusted person.
Correct.
And then they slowly, I can hear, sorry, I got distracted because it's storming out here and I can hear it in my microphone, in my headphones. But the idea that this trusted person brought these people in, and then all of a sudden these people started to look at the potential. And they said, well, what's blocking this potential from becoming reality? And it's a person. It's Bob.
It's Bob.
We have to get him out of the way because then we can do what we want with this.
Or
And this person was the same person who said at one point, if a kid is on a certain level, he should be wearing an orange jumpsuit.
Right.
Like put them in a jumpsuit because then everybody would know that they're on level. Like this is what that person turned into. And we're like, what? I mean, they're not. I mean, some are, but the vast majority of our kids have not actually committed like crimes. No. Some of them have, but the majority of them, I'm not justifying this, so bear with me.
Well, he had done it and got us in trouble with the state. And because the state was like, why are you identifying this child this way?
Yeah. Some of our kids have committed crimes. Right. They do have a record. But the majority of those crimes have been the result of them being victimized and abused in some way to begin with when they were young. So again, I'm not justifying bad behavior because of somebody else's things, but a juvenile, the way the young mind works is that they are perpetrating what happened to them.
Right.
And so that's neither here nor there. That's not the point of this particular discussion, but it's wild when you see, because we face it with counties now, we face it with parents now, where we have we're trusted with the mental health and safety of these children, and we have a plan that's agreed upon by, 20 people. Right. We have our core team of 8. We have a team of 12 to 15 in treatment team. So by the time a decision is made for any individual case with a kid, there's 20, 25, up to 30 people involved in the decision.
Have 100 years of experience making those decisions.
Not just 100 years of experience, but decades worth of like actual academic education on top of the hundreds of years of experience combined. And then we still get young caseworkers or young people that are like, no, like we don't like that. It's like, okay, well, what do you want us to do? We want you to serve them. We want you to provide care. Okay, well, this is what and it just continues and you always are going to face this, like, and we used the word adversity a ton last week, and I don't want it to become numb to it, but we've used this idea of adversity and how we're going to face it. Anytime that there's vision, there's opportunity. Anytime there's opportunity, there's adversity. But anytime there's opportunity and adversity, there's also going to be somebody that comes along and tries to take the vision to create a different opportunity.
Right. And just to show you the fight,
we got to be aware of that.
Same was when I was in this, keep in mind the flag story or the stamp story. But when I was brought in a few weeks later, I had the accountant and I had our attorney that was there. And I had developed a relationship with them and spent some personal time with them so that they were looking at me differently. And so I was kind of becoming the influencer there for them. And so he calls this meeting, we go in, and he said, here's documentation of what Bob has paid this. It was a guy that did some work for us in the building. He was a contractor. And he'd invoice us and I'd pay him. And so the news story was that this is a friend of mine that I've hired, and we're funneling money to him, and then he's bringing money back to me. So I'm still pocketing money. And my accountant looked at him and said, where do you have this proof? And we even picked up the phone and called the guy that day. And he was like, are you insane? He said, I'm just trying to help out Safehouse because I believe in the vision. Right. But it was always, and what I found out through this was more than likely these people of power had done that because I wouldn't even think about that, So somewhere in their life, they had double dipped somewhere and they just assumed that I was double dipping. Yeah. And I remember again, the accountant standing up and he said, and just before he stood up, I had it. I'd lost it. I wanted to throw a chair at him. And instead, I just got up and I started crying. And I said, why do you want to destroy this vision so bad? And I remember my attorney, which is still our attorney today, she looked at me and goes, breathe, Bob, breathe. And I said, I'm tired of breathing. And I remember just throwing it up. And the accountant got up and he said, I will never be part of this ever again with you. My suggestion to you, Bob, is to get rid of him. And so we quit the meeting. I stayed with the attorney. I said, how do we change the bylaws to where I can get him out? And she said, you can get him out already. He's causing a disruption. And I'll back you legally if he comes after you. Yeah. So I then removed a couple leaders. And before I could remove him, he came in with a letter of resignation that afternoon. And I remember the feeling of freedom come over us when he did that. And so what I ended up doing was the administrator was still in place, and I realized that if I went in and jerked the administrator out the way I wanted to, it could hurt us financially, because everybody knew who he was.
Yeah, he put some,
and you don't change the administrator quickly because it says you have major problems. We're not putting kids there.
Instability. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I took 6 months. And I went in and I got with all of our counties. I think we had like 22. I probably had 22, 23 contracts out at a time out of 88. I think we have 68 now. And I remember going to each of their offices on a monthly basis for 6 months. And about the third month in, I said, how are we doing as a company? And just kind of got to know them. And on the third or fourth weekend, I said, I'm good. I'm just going to tell you right now, there's probably going to be a change at the top. I said, we're not, I want to take the company in a different way than what it is. And I said, I'm going to have to make some leadership change. And I had developed a rapport with these executives that I could trust them.
Yeah.
Because our administrator basically was dealing with the intake people. So I went over their heads and was dealing directly with the executives of the county. And so I slowly began to work that in until I got us in a position where I could go in there. I finally went into him and I said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to move you into marketing. I'm moving you out of administration.
Right.
And if you do this, this, and this, and you don't stir up trouble, you can work until you're retired. I don't care. And within a week, he had tried to bash me to one of the counties, which I knew he would.
Right.
So I fired him.
Yeah.
That's what I ended up doing. We didn't flinch at all in business because of what we had done and what I'd learned on the prior before that, But looking back on it, I realized that the fight's always been the same. It just comes in different avenues, and that power always wants to be pulled from you at different time. And I use that word power because I don't believe in being the power source of everything. I'm not a power hungry person. But I do realize this. I don't give it up as easy as I used to.
Yeah.
I don't give up that influence. And I think power and influence goes together, but I won't give up my influence now. The counties know who I am, okay? Our contractors know who I am. Everybody knows who I am. And there for a period of time, maybe it was low self-esteem or it was the people I put around me that kept on trying to push me down. But now I'm Bob Denon. I'm the president of Safehouse. I'm the founder of Safehouse. I am the CEO of Safehouse, and I'm going to live in that position. I will not shrink from that position, and that's one thing. And I don't say that to be haughty or anything. This is who I am.
Yeah.
And this is what the company is around. Now, I'm in a position now over the next 4 or 5 years, I want to start working on what's called legacy.
Right.
And so I'm taking a different approach. That's why I leave for periods of time and get out of the building for a period of time, is because I'm trying to work on the legacy, how we're going to turn it over, and it's not going to miss anything, but it's all based off of my experiences of what I've had in the past. And so when we look back at it, and basically that was a big disruption. That really caused a lot of stress across the board. But we handled it. I remember people coming up to me and they were behind me and not behind the administrator, and they were begging me to fire him. Begging me. I think there was a couple times you come to my office and say, why don't you just get rid of him? And a lot. And I remember saying there's a right way to do this where it does not affect the organization negatively. I've got to do it the right way. And I remember for months I was by myself. People were mad at me. People were like, why are you afraid to go fire him? But I realized that if I didn't do it a certain way, we would have a disruption that we couldn't control, because at that point I had given up power. At that point I had given up my influence. And so it took me a while to get the power and influence back within the organization. And I still do that. I'll still go around and I'll ask people their opinion, and I will change my mind based off of the people that I put around me. But as we shared last week, there's times that I'm going to put my foot down and say, I've gathered all the information. This is the decision I'm going to make. It's not up for discussion anymore. Right. We're moving on.
Yeah.
And in the past, I would probably go like I did with the church. I would try to convince everybody to come along and stuff like that. So I've learned over the fight years and years and years. And maybe if I learned this way back, we wouldn't have went through everything. But in each one of those disruptions, we've learned something major that's put us in the position of where we're in today.
Yeah.
And I think we had to go through all of that to be where we're at today.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree.
Even to the point now we're looking at new horizons. We went and bought a bunch of video equipment, and now, there for a long time, everybody was like, well, what are you going to do when you're not building buildings? I'm like, I guess I'll go fish. But what I'm doing now is I want to reach the nation with the message of Jesus Christ. I want to reach the nation with the message of, if you have a vision, that you can do some things. And so there's some opportunities that's coming before us, and those that are watching this, you can pray for it. But there might be a TV show down the road, that will include fishing and a kid. We're not sure. We're doing some negotiating right now.
Yep.
But we felt that in the last, we were talking a few weeks ago, I think, Brandon, about how quickly things move. And when we begin to look at the vision of what we wanted to do with social media and different things like that, there's been these doors that have opened up to get us the experience that we need, right? And to get the people about it. I know that you're pretty pumped because you get to unpack all the equipment. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like Christmas in the middle of May,
Yeah.
But everything's just like falling into place and almost as if it's happening to us rather than stuff that we're doing to make it happen.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're obviously rolling with the punches and dealing with the, for lack of a better word, adversity that's showing itself in the midst of all these projects that we got going on. But so far, nothing that we haven't been able to handle. I'm excited about where it's going.
People have always asked me individually, like, how did you do this? And when they're talking about Safe House or Refuge or any of the other things that we do. And my answer is always the same. I don't know. Like, I really don't. Like, I could look back over the course of a decade and I could tell you what I did, but I don't, when I set out to do it, I didn't know how. I just knew like what I wanted to do. And I knew why. Simon Sinek, I think is his name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he wrote a book called Start With Why. And in it, he talks about how, like, start by asking yourself the question, why? Why do you want to do what you want to do?
Right.
Why does this vision matter? Why should you do it? Because if you can answer the why, then you'll be more motivated when you don't know the how.
Right.
You'll dig a little deeper.
Right.
If you don't know the what, that's okay too, because you'll figure out like what it looks like. But if you know why you want to do it, and our why is like, why do we do Safe House? Because there's an entire generation of young people that are forgotten, neglected, walked past.
We want to change lives for eternity.
Overlooked, and we want to impact those lives and change them for eternity.
Right.
And it's a very specific group of people that we, that we're serving at the residential side. But on the broader spectrum, the why for the podcast, or the why for anything that we do with video equipment, or the why for anything that we do with Sunday mornings back when we did them. And there's always that like underlying possibility that something like that could continue. It's because we want to change adult lives for eternity, or young people's lives that are not in a residential thing. We know the why.
One of the things that bothered me when we were pastoring was the fact that on Sunday morning and Sunday night I would preach, but I didn't see that we did much with it.
Yeah.
We were reaching to the same 100, 150 people, 90 people, whatever would show up. And I didn't see it change in the world. And it always bothered me. It was like, there's got to be more to this. I mean, I used to get aggravated from Sunday morning to Sunday night because I would preach a message on Sunday morning. Then, of course, we had church on Sunday night because the denomination required it. And I'd have to preach another message. And I remember in the middle of the day thinking, I've got nothing for Sunday night because they haven't had time to go out and do what I preached on Sunday morning.
Right.
So why would I come up with another message for Sunday night? We haven't even had time to practice what we're doing. And one of the things, and I'm going to share a little bit of a vision of what I would like to accomplish in the next year with some of the multimedia stuff that's going on. Just to those that are watching, maybe you can say a little prayer for us. But I would love to be able to take a young person that's in the foster care system, put some highlight to the foster care system, but also change this stigma that teenagers in a foster care system is all bad, you don't want them. And that's why residentials are needed for teenagers, is because there's this stigma that most foster care families, most, not all, but most will take infants or smaller kids because they don't want to deal with the teenager. And what I want to do is I want to take a teenager out that's never fished. And I want to do a TV show with them fishing. and watch the excitement that comes on their face when they catch their first fish and the lessons that can be learned off of that. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of each of these half-hour TV shows, whatever it is, put a life lesson in there that would reach, tens of thousands, if not more.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the direction I'm going with, not even knowing that when I started fishing, Brandon, when we brought you on board, for what we wanted to do here, that wasn't even part of the procedure of what we were looking at. But when we begin to look at we're going to make a substantial investment in equipment. Mm-hmm. And I remember you guys coming to me. You remember Brandon coming to me. And what did I ask for? 2 or 3 different lists, didn't I? What were they called?
You asked for the big and hairy list and then the regular list, like the bare minimum list. So
right.
The big and hairy and the bare minimum.
Right. And then but you added one more list to it.
Yeah, so
and I didn't tell him to.
The big, hairy, and
I brought him I brought him the regular list, I brought him the big and hairy list, and then I brought him the big, hairy, and well-lit list.
Which just included lighting.
It included a really nice set of lights.
It was really funny.
Yeah.
And we were able to get
all of it.
Last list. The big, hairy, and well-lit list, which is disgusting.
I think it surprised the daylights out of you when you brought the big, hairy list with lights.
Absolutely.
Or with the lighting.
Absolutely.
Or how did you pronounce it?
Big, hairy, and well-lit.
Big, hairy, and well-lit, right.
Yeah.
And I remember you coming to me and saying, if we invest in the lights, we can rent the equipment to help pay it back. Mm-hmm. And what that did, just to show you how things lead into another, well, what that did was that immediately went to my brain was like, well, I don't want to rent things, but how can we get the equipment to make money, to possibly get it to be paid back? And so I made a couple phone calls. And, one of the organizations that I fish with was, we're not able to say anything about it right now, needs a very strong presence they're kind of being left behind because they just don't have the social media that they need. And I've been feeling that there's such a great history within this organization that I wanted to help them, and I didn't know how I was going to help them. So I ended up calling the organization. I said, hey, you want us to do some live feeds for you? And before we knew it, we're starting to talk about how much they're going to pay. And then that conversation turned into, hey, do you want to produce 13 shows for us next year? When they looked at the teddy bear story. So immediately I began to say, well, is that within the frame of what Safehouse wants to do? But if you want to understand it, it's in the frame of what Brandon wants to do. I mean, that's what he went to school for. And so one thing leads to another, and we don't know. We don't know if it's going to happen or not. We're still negotiating. But there's a possibility that we can do 10 shows next year on a particular channel. That's not on all key TV networks, but it's on a lot of them. You can at least watch it online at least. That we might be able to make some money off of some of these TV shows of me fishing with a kid, okay, and showing him how to catch a kid to catch a fish the first time, and then do some leadership lessons afterwards it's over with. That could reach, and I think the number we're saying is 500 to 600,000 homes views, okay, through this, if it works out. We don't know if it's going to work out or not, but just again, Brandon brings the list that I didn't want. I just wanted 2. He brings 3. We jump on the 3rd list, and then all these opportunities have opened before us. And what you and I are trying to do is to wade through making sure that the opportunity is not to distract us from really what we're called to do.
Right.
And I think it still comes down to the vision of what we want to do, and that is to change a life for eternity. Now, can we do it this way where Bob's now got time because he's not building buildings to go and build individual people on the lake?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? Why not give it a shot? Let's see what happens. It might bore we'll know within the first couple of weeks if we're going to bore them to death.
Right.
But it just, and what started this whole thing, and I'm going to put a little push out there, but on the Pursuit channel next Monday, on the Pursuit channel, the second Monday, not this Monday coming up, which would be the 1st, but the following Monday. I don't know what that date is.
It'd be the 8th.
No, it's not the 8th, I don't think. Is it? Is it the 8th or the 9th?
It's next. This is going to air on Monday the 1st.
Okay, right.
And so it's going to be the following Monday is the 8th.
So Monday the 8th at 4:30 on the Pursuit channel, Central Time, there's going to be a TV show what I've been told, it's featuring me. because they did some filming on me on this particular tournament that I did, and it's going to be on the Pursuit channel on the 8th at 4:30 Central Time. So if you have the Pursuit channel, if not, I think you can get online somehow and find it. And I don't know how much time I've got. I know they did a lot of filming of me catching fish, but what they did was that just it ignited something in me that, okay, can we make money at it? Not that I'm worried about money, but I like to pay for the equipment. It's Brandon's dream. We want to help Brandon accomplish his dream and get the experience that he's at.
Right.
It looks like some of the people that did the teddy bear story, right, is going to work with us on some filming things that we're going to be doing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of the same crew coming with us for that fishing trip as well.
Yeah. So, and this is a perfect example to show you how there's an opportunity. Let's seize the opportunity. If we're not supposed to do it, shut it down. But right now, doors are opening. I mean, this one particular person I've been talking to on a weekly basis, and I didn't call him this week. He called me. He turned around and called me.
Yeah.
And do you hear that ambulance?
Yeah.
Yeah. or a cop car or something. And he was like, hey, we haven't talked this week. I was concerned. Are we still moving forward? Yeah, we're still moving forward. I just missed talking to you. And so it's kind of neat how the doors are opening for new things, because we made the decision to not get the first list or the second list, but I didn't even know about the third list. And what did Brandon do?
Yeah.
He turned around and he said, well, if we're going to go for broke, let's go for broke.
Yeah, man, you told me big and hairy, so I was like, all right, let's really push the limits on
That's
it.
funny too, because we got to throw back to like back in the Russ and original Safe House like after school program days, because the big, hairy, audacious goals.
Right.
He used to say, what is your BHAG list?
Right.
And I was like, I don't want to talk about that. Like that's a weird statement. He goes, what's your BHAG list? I said, what's a BHAG? And he said, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. Like, what's the thing you could do if you didn't have anything holding you back?
Right.
And for whatever reason, and you've always had that same idea too, but as a child and your youth pastor says it to you, it like instills something where it's like, what could you do if if you could do anything, if you had $1 million, what would you do? Right? If money wasn't an issue, if nothing was holding you back, what would you do? And that's it's become a cliche, but it's such a great question to ask about what somebody's passionate about.
Right.
Like what would you put your effort towards? And so we do that with literally every single task that we do. Like, what's the big picture, right? And then we look at what resources are available, and then we pull back, right, to where it can happen. And then we keep that goal as the goal so we can ramp up to it.
If it matches the vision.
Right, as long as it matches the vision. And we've said this before, that everything has to pass through the filter of the vision.
Right.
And Safe House has always been it's broader than just residential. It's always been broader than just residential. We were a church first. We were an after-school program second. We were a residential third. We still do one of those things daily, the residential. But there's still ministry that happens outside of that. And Safe House has been, and this is not to plug or anything, but just to say, like, we've invested resources through donations to a broad range of different types of companies, because like now we're not in a position where we have to go to people and sit in their offices and say, here's our vision, can you help us?
Right.
We're able to go to people and say, what's your vision? We want to help you.
Correct.
And that's always been a goal of mine. And I remember at Refuge, when we started to see some consistent cash flow from a donation standpoint, I had made it a target that we would go to our big donor and say, hey, we don't need you to give as much as you've been giving. Please give less or none at all, and give that to some other company that's just starting out or that needs it more than us. That would always be a really big benefit to us. We also rent the building, which I know drives you crazy.
Yeah.
But we rent the building, and I love that because it's income as far as being able to serve kids. But one of the things that I would love to do eventually is not rent the building out, but then still have people host birthday parties or special events there, and those people specifically wouldn't have been able to pay for a rental in some other location. So now the thing that was like an income stream for us is not needed as income. So we're not going to use it as income anymore. We're going to use it as ministry. We're going to use it to fill a need. We're going to find the need. We're going to meet the need. And so that's just kind of a thread that kind of goes throughout the whole thing. We never intended residential, and here we are. We never intended to produce media. Here we might be doing that. We never intended to do a podcast. Here we're doing it. And it all is as a part of the vision of changing lives for eternity.
I think that what we find out is that one thing leads to another. I was talking, I think it was last week, about don't worry about the destination. because when you get to the destination, there's going to be more opportunities to come. But if the vision is clear, you'll pick the right what's the word I'm looking for? The right direction, okay? The right direction to make sure that you keep moving the vision forward. And the vision will look differently. The vision never looks differently. Let me change that. The vision's always the same, but the avenue or the vehicle to reach the vision to its potential changes at times.
Its expression can be different.
Right. Now, if I can reach 1 million teenagers by putting a fishing show together, okay, do you see what's happening?
Yeah.
All right. And let me just say this. I know we're running out of time at the end here. You mentioned something that's raining again. You mentioned something about
I brought the rain.
Renting the building.
Yeah.
Okay, and how I don't like that. And here's my reasoning for what it is. I know at times you'll do a car wash. And I remember at church we used to do hot dog sales and things like that. All right. And I remember that we used to work our butts off for a hot dog sale with a car wash, and we'd make $500. And out of half of that $500, I donated $250 for the supplies. Okay? So I begin to evaluate what's my time and energy accomplishing. And one of the things that I learned a long time ago was this. You get what you pay for. All right? If your vision is a multi-million-dollar vision, and this is one of the things that an influencer that I still meet with once a year told me, Bob, your number's wrong. You just shared a multi-million-dollar vision with me, and he asked me the price tag on it, and I said about $100,000, and I didn't know. I was just guessing. He said, you don't have a $100,000 vision, you have a multi-million-dollar vision. And I look at it this way: if you are going to develop something that's only going to take a hot dog, all right, to produce the income that you need for it, maybe you need to think a little better. Maybe you need to think a little deeper on that. And I'm not against hot dog sales, and I'm not against car washes, okay? But the reason why we ended up doing those things had nothing to do with the money that we would bring in. It had to do with the camaraderie and the fun that we would have with the people that was doing it at that time.
Right.
Because you're not going to fund a vision. And you know, through this whole process, and I won't go real deep into it because we're running out of time, but through this process, I challenged you on this equipment. And I remember you and I had a couple days that was kind of bumping heads.
Right.
You know, because I challenged you to the place that I wanted to make sure you were getting what we needed to get.
Right.
And I think through that challenge, we ended up making a couple changes, didn't we, Brandon?
Yeah, we made a few changes to the list actually after that.
Right.
Yeah. So, added some things, took some things off.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was just I wanted to drive the system. I wanted to drive the system to say, okay, now you think you know this is what it is. And then what I did was I went and did a little bit of research, and I threw a screwdriver in the whole system, didn't I? And I remember you saying, this is not going to work and that's not going to work. And in the back of my mind, I kind of felt like you were right. But I felt like that we had not done our homework the way that we needed to do our homework. That's how I felt as a leader. And I know that I was getting some pushback from you guys when I brought that to your attention. And I brought it in a way of saying, did we look at this equipment? Have we talked to this person? What are we, you know? And the reason why is because I didn't get a 100% confident off of you two. I had 95% confident when I talked to you about what was going on. And that made me concerned because I wanted to do this in one shot. You got a thought?
I was just ready to bounce off of anything that you said.
And
I agree. I think that it did make us, look into what we were getting and make sure that we were closer to 100% confident,
Right. So I didn't really, after it was all said and done, we basically got everything except for a couple things that we changed, right?
Yeah. We added 2 things and took 1 off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember the day that we sat in my office and you were kind of pushing back on me and I was pushing back on you. And it was like, I'm not freeing up the money until I know that you've done your research. And I can't remember the whole conversation of that day. I just know that me and you were pushing back pretty hard. Yeah. And you were like, we're ready to go. This won't work. That won't work. And it was like, I want to be confident. And what do we have? That confidence within 24 hours?
I mean, it was the same day before the end of the business day.
It was like
we made
one
a
of
couple
those
phone calls. And
I call it an aha moment. It was an aha moment. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, we are looking at this too much, in this direction. And so, whatever that has to do with what we've talked about today is I think that you have to challenge the vision. You have to challenge the direction that you're going in, and that you've got to put the checks and balances in place to make sure that you're moving it in the direction that you need to move it into.
Right.
So with that being said, I've talked enough today.
No, you're good. Yeah. We are, as you can tell, vision is kind of the thing that we are the most passionate about, you know, and because without vision, and the Bible says that for lack of vision, people perish. And if you don't know, there's an old quote, if you don't know where you're going, you won't know when you get there. And it's if you're just kind of walking aimlessly, then you're going to just go wherever the wind blows the strongest.
And here's the thing about it. Every day that goes by will be a wasted day.
Yeah. You don't want to waste the moments.
Each day is important.
Right.
You know, for what we want to accomplish in our life.
Right.
And if you don't have that vision to move forward, then you just tread water on a daily basis. I can't stand when people say, I can't wait for the weekend to come here. I can't wait for the weekend. And it's like, you know, I had a friend of mine that, it used to be a friend of mine. I kind of made some statements to him and made him mad. That was a fishing guy. And every time I would sit down with him, he would complain about how much he hated his job. I mean, just relentless on, I hate my job. I hate this place. I hate the owner. Life is miserable. Like, just woe is me. And so I got tired of hearing it. I said, hey, do you want to make a change? Well, I've been there 27 years. I said, do you want to make a change? Do you want to do something that's going to make a difference instead of you just filling boxes and being miserable your whole life? He said, what are you doing? And he said, you offering me a job? And I said, yeah, I'm offering you a job. I said, come work for me. I need a good maintenance guy. Someone that's going to keep the place up and work with kids. And I said, let's get you out of that. All right? And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, I don't think you can pay me what I'm making. I said, what are you making? And he said a number. I said, I'll pay you $5,000 more than what you're making right now. I said, just come work for me. You're miserable. Okay? And he waited a week or two to answer me. And then said, oh, it's just going to be too far for me to drive. Okay? And then slowly but surely, he began to disconnect himself from me, okay? Because I wasn't there to listen to his complaining.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, life is too short for you to work 5 days a week, and you're miserable every day of your life. And maybe someone's stuck in a job right now where you're miserable. And I say this, we'll end with this. But you talk about asking the question. I'll embarrass Mom all the time. We'll go into a restaurant and we'll sit there in that restaurant. And if a lady comes up to me and I feel like I need to do it, or one of our servers, a male, I'll say, if you could do anything in the world and money was not the issue, what would you do? And I remember I can see their light bulbs come on. I said, you don't have to answer me now, but you have to answer me before we leave today. And Angie's like, why do you do that? You don't have to do that. And every time, they bring back something that is world-changing.
Yeah.
And my comment to them is, what's stopping you? Well, I don't have the money. Well, I can't afford to do it right now. Wait a minute. Can you or can't you? What's the steps that you can take to move that position forward?
Right.
You know, is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And so if we've learned anything today, it's the fact that take every day, even though it's in the midst of turmoil and trial, take every day and make the best out of each of those days that you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Moments matter.
Yep.
And the day, all it takes is one. You know, we that's just something that we live by. All it takes is one moment to change your life. It could be one moment that changes it for good. It could be one moment that changes it for bad.
Right.
And if there's something, we talked about this last week, and we'll end with this note, is that there's a lot of those times, some of those moments we have no control over. But you do have control over how you respond in the next moment.
Right.
And I think that that's something that we need to really focus in on when things don't go our way. When things are, when the person's trying to push us out of the company, or the person's trying to challenge the vision, or the vision is being challenged because culturally it's just new and nobody's ever done it before.
Right.
Whatever it is, you can't control that moment, but you can control how you respond in the moment after. And so often that's the moment that will determine whether or not that vision continues or stops.
Right.
So take the moment, live in it, sit in it, and then do something with the moment after. And with that, we're going to be wrapping up. We appreciate what you guys are continuing to give us feedback on Facebook. Yep. Brandon leaves links on the YouTube page. Each video, it's got links to Dad's Facebook, my Facebook, safehousersd.com. We love to hear the comments, so thank you so much. Next week, new studio. Brandon, you excited?
I am beyond pumped.
It's very cool.
And I'm not going
to be there for the first one, but we had talked about the possibility of getting you on the phone.
Yeah.
And doing like a segment. So
we might even be able to do something like a Skype interview or something.
Yeah, we'll see. He'll probably be driving.
Will we have the equipment that would actually bring me up if I want to talk?
We can figure it out.
Yeah.
Wow.
We got all kinds of new stuff we're going to be doing.
Yeah, it's the big hairy with lights.
There's also the possibility, and I'm going to throw Brandon like out into the cold rain right now, but there's a possibility that one episode coming up, not this next one, but one coming up in the next several weeks, could be like live streamed, where you can like engage with us and like leave questions or like a Q&A type thing. Right. We might do it as the normal podcast. We might do it as an additional thing in the middle of the week or whatever. But we'd love to like have live interactions with you where you can ask us a question or you could give us a comment and we could talk about it for a little bit and then we'll go on from there. So there's a possibility of some live like streaming happening in real time.
And we'll let everyone know like the week before that we're going to do
we're not going to just spring it. Yeah, keep that hour open or that half hour open or however long we're going to do. But that's part of what we're looking at doing is doing some live production stuff. So with that, Dad, thanks so much for taking some time today.
Thanks, Brandon.
Today is today again for those of you who have ever served in the military. I want to end it with that again and say thank you for what you do and the sacrifice that you make and the families of those people. That sacrifice, if there's one thing I know about important vision, is that the people who support the person doing the job almost have it more difficult than the people who are doing it. And that changes, that varies. But to the families of people who have active military members, we love you. Thank you. To those who have given up their husbands or wives because they've been active in military service, thank you. We love you. We apologize. It's a week late. Crazy times. I lost track of the time frame. But just so much. Thank you for the sacrifice.
Live life like a marble.
Yes. Take advantage of the moments. And we'll see you guys next week. Have a good week.
See ya.
Bye.